UFC 259 Adesanya versus Blachowicz recap. My, this one got me thinking. Is he daring to be great, coming up a weight class and doing so in interesting fashion, not necessarily putting on the full 205? A lot of questions would be asked, about this particular, coming up for Izzy. Could he take Jan's additional weight? Could Jan withstand the barrage of feints and all that good stuff that Izzy throws? This is the reaction video, guys. Look, before I begin, guys, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Your subscriptions, your thumbs up, your comments are greatly appreciated. Let's get down to business. Coming up from the Aljamain fight and, the Amanda Nunes fight was a nuclear explosion. This was a slower paced fight. This was more deliberate. It maybe didn't have the excitement level from a fight perspective that, some of the fights had prior. Definitely not the controversy rather. And we are doing a reaction video on Aljamain Sterling versus Peter Yan, so please check that out on our channel as well. But look, let's get to Izzy versus Blachowicz. It was really interesting, and I think what was interesting is off the bat, you could see that Izzy had the speed advantage. He was touching Yan pretty frequently. Yan was biting on every feint. Izzy really dominated in that particular, stanza and aspect of the fight. But interestingly enough, especially upon the conclusion of round one, Yan was relatively durable. I mean, in that he wasn't getting severely outclassed. He was holding his own on the feet. And I think this is an interesting aspect here. When the walk-ins happened, Izzy was all business. Man, I love that choice of walkout song, Kool in the Gang. He was in a very different mood, and it showed. It was rather tentative. It was the same stuff by Izzy, but the demeanor, the gravitas of the situation was definitely much more different. And in Yan, you have the weight of a pure light heavyweight in Jan Blachowicz at 205, as well as the punching and knockout power. And I think you saw Izzy kind of respect that. With that being said, he was more or less to a degree winning the stanzas, winning the exchanges on the feet, but he wasn't putting Yan away. Yan was landing as well. With the level of frequency that Izzy was landing, absolutely not. But when Yan landed, you could see that there was respect in Izzy's eyes, and much like the Yoel Romero fight, not quite there. Izzy had at the back of his mind the power that Jan Blachowicz had. And, there were stanzas within the first 3 rounds where it was kind of exchanges back and forth in terms of the ability for one individual to strike and gain an upper advantage. But we never saw at one particular point in time Izzy really take over. There was a lot of comfort in what Izzy was doing, and there were times where it was almost a carbon copy of the Paulo Costa fight. You had those leg kicks that were landing quite frequently. It was snapping Yan back with a jab, but Yan would always come back, and there was always that respect. What I found really interesting, however, was at least in the first 3 rounds, the inability for Blachowicz to close the distance and really utilize clinch, and he did do that, however, a couple of times, I believe in the second and the third. But it's really interesting to watch Izzy scramble when he's backed up against the cage, and he's wildly strong. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. We saw it in the Brunson fight. It's very hard to keep it there. And Yan had that close extension upon the waist, but Izzy would quite frequently get out of those positions. And, whatever advantage Yan had from a weight perspective really wasn't relegated here. In the 4th round, more or less at the half of the round, around 2 to 2.5 minutes in, is where we see the real chapter changes in here, in that within an exchange on the feet, Blachowicz changes levels and takes Adesanya down. And this is really, the really interesting aspect of the fight. This is what a lot of people wanted to see. Can Israel Adesanya, withstand a really strong wrestler? And you got to understand, Blachowicz is predominantly a striker. He's got a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He doesn't necessarily have, the all-American credentials and chops in wrestling. So it was really interesting to say, A, could Blachowicz take Adesanya down? Tick on the 4th round. B, could he keep him and maintain him down? And the answer was yes, he could. Israel Adesanya, the level of dexterity and finesse that he was able to show against the cage wasn't necessarily there. And here lies the fact of the matter that those additional, let's call it 4 to 5 pounds were really showing in Adesanya, because actually it probably would be more than that, closer to 6, right? Because Blachowicz, was probably blown up to closer to over 220 to 225 pounds. And here, in conjunction with, strong upper control, for the most part, they were in half guard. And, that's a position, within a jiu-jitsu context, that's better than, I guess, a mount. So Izzy was keeping Jan at bay, but there was control there, and he could not, I repeat, he just could not create scrambles, create any space at the bottom. And that was due to, a combination of technique, but, that weight does play a part in the role. And, at the conclusion of the 4th round, you could easily see that Jan had won that, and it was kind of like a path to victory. Coming out in the 5th, both guys, a little bit wary, but Jan definitely, sucking in the big ones. It looked like the grappling exchange had really affected Jan a little bit more, but man, again, very similar. Halfway into that round, Blachowicz takes Adesanya down and is able to maintain and ride. And I think even upon the conclusion of that round, go to full mount and rain strikes. And you knew that the last 2 rounds, Jan had won. So he had to win 1 of 3. And it was relatively unanimous. So, look, there wasn't the pompous and overall excitement in this fight versus the couple of the other fights there. Israel dared to dream, and that's an amazing trait about Israel. He sees what he wants and shoots from the hip, and that's great. And I actually think that this is going to loosen Izzy up a bit more. Not that he wasn't loose, but you definitely don't want to stop champions like Israel Adesanya from trying things. And I think it's gonna make him have a more proactive focus, because he's definitely gonna come up. That fight with Jones has to happen. It doesn't have to be anytime soon. And definitely from a wrestling perspective, he probably sees that, any other entry back into 205 probably needs to be greeted with the 205 weight, probably needs to be greeted there. It's a different beast. As for Blachowicz, how can you not like the bloke? A likable guy, was able to show enough durability on the feet without, landing a closeout a trademark Polish power hammer to conclude the fight. But, was able to, and this is mixed martial arts. This is the great thing about mixed martial arts. You got to be really proficient, at least in the top level, in every sort of technique. And Jan was able to find the chink in the armor in this particular day, which was, taking Israel down and controlling him. And he is and still, and put some respect in my boy Blachowicz's name. He's a good guy. He deserves everything that's all the praises that are bestowed to him. And Izzy will be back. He doesn't need anything from us. He will rule the middleweight roost, and there are challenges there for him to basically take care of. That's the reaction, guys. Again, give us a thumbs up. Put us some comments. What do you think? What do you think about the performance? When do you think Izzy comes back to 205, and is it against Jones or maybe someone else? What do you think of Blachowicz? Can he rule this roost for a while? Rakic had a less than impressive performance against Santos, but he is a challenger there. We have Yuri Prohaska around there as well. Reyes will no doubt bounce back. So there are challenges there. There are definitely challenges there, guys. So don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and peace out.